I'm writing my story so that others might see fragments of themselves.
Look for the silver lining whenever a cloud appears in the blue.
We all love a good story. Stories have defined and shaped us during our childhood, growing up years, and in our everyday life. Stories are important. Stories are powerful. But the most important story is the story we tell ourselves and the way we tell it. Today, I am in conversation with Rajesh Ivaturi, founder and CEO of Lanes, a storytelling platform. Hello and welcome to Between Us. Make every conversation count. In today's episode, we're going to talk about storytelling, the impact of storytelling, and how stories shape our lives. Welcome to the show, Rajesh. So, Rajesh, tell me, what is a talking relationship? How do you define a talking relationship?
Talking relationship. Interesting. So in any of the conversations I have my mental 3 pointers.
Mhm.
Okay. So the first thing I tell myself, speak with authenticity.
Mhm.
When I say speak with authenticity, what I mean is use more of I statements
Mhm.
and talk more about my personal experience, my the way I think, not to make it a generalized statement, so that it comes across as what I feel or what my experience has been. So that's point number one, speak with authenticity. The second thing I try to do, not always successful, is listen with intent. So when I say listen with intent, it means try to understand what the other person is trying to say, and paying full attention, so that when you understand, the other person also feels heard, and you can then build on what the other person is saying, so that the conversation is in the right direction. We not often, but much as I try, sometimes what happens is that even as the other person is speaking, my mind is running in different directions. But it's an effort to pull it back and say, okay, try to understand what the other person is saying, especially when the other person is saying something that I don't agree or have a different view on. But still, that's the second credo, which is listen with intent. And the third one is engage with respect. Okay. More often than not, I'm successful here, but I think that is important, especially in any meaningful conversation one wants to have. I think engaging with respect. So to my mind, I think these three are the ones. In special cases, maintain confidentiality if the topic is such. Where someone is sharing something very personal. So, my wife jokes that if something is said to Rajesh, it's like throwing it in the well. So if I know that this is confidential or important for the other person, it's as good as dead. Nobody else will know, including the people dearest to me, because they don't need to know. So yeah, I think these are the 3-4 things I try to follow. To me, that's what I think is conversation.
Great. Talk to me a little bit more about the I factor. What do you mean by I? Because sometimes it might also be I don't know if the correct word for it, misconstrued for the fact that the conversation is a lot about I, me, myself. So where do we draw the line? I understand you have to speak with authenticity about yourself, but where do we draw the line between I and, because let's say we're having a conversation and you want to bring your perspective. Having said that, there is also a perspective on the other side. So where would you draw that line? Because sometimes it might be like, okay, this person is going on and on about I. Because at the end of the day, we are talking about a conversation, right? We are talking about engaging with another person. So where is it that we can bring the other person onto my side? How do we do this?
I think I'll talk about the way I try to have these conversations in an I perspective. The way I see it, I think the I part actually makes it far more easier for the other person also to engage. Let me explain this part. So, for example, if I say, as per my experience, this is what I felt, or as per the information I have gathered so far, this is my opinion on a particular topic. Okay, so then it leaves a lot of room for open-minded conversations, because when I state it like I feel this way or my experience has been this way, A, I'm not making it universal. B, if I say that as per the information I have gathered so far, this is what I think about this particular topic, then it also leaves a lot of room for more information to come in, and also doesn't make the other person feel that, okay, it's not like I'm making it sound like a gospel truth. This is what this person feels given the information that this person has. That is where I think the I statements are actually, like, for example, even if it's a very controversial topic, for example, if you present it as my experience has been this way, A, you're not making it a universal thing. Ki aise hi, this is how this is how these things are. Okay. A, I'm making it experiential, and B, even if it's not experiential, okay. But if I have to make a point on a topic which is not coming from a direct experience, if I say based on the information I have so far, this seems to be the position I'm taking. So it also allows me to be open-minded, and the other person also has a chance to state a different point of view without having to feel that they may be hurting my emotions or my going against my thought process, because that to my mind, that way actually the conversations can build. But to the other point that you mentioned about going on and on, that obviously is not the way I think a good conversation goes. I think what you were alluding to, if I understood your question on the I point, was I think if it's all about I, me, my perspective, as long as it's being presented in a manner where I'm willing to engage with the other person, it's okay. But if it's being presented as the gospel truth or the only way to look at certain things, then obviously I think it becomes it sort of shuts the conversation down, because either I think in such situations, the other person either gets into a fight or flight mode, I guess, because if somebody is taking a very strong position, at least I do that. If someone takes a very strong position, I say, I mean, let it go. I mean, why do I break my head with this person? Let me just let that, because this person has taken such a strong view. There's no point debating, especially if it's a non-issue for me. And in most conversations, the way I see it is that better to keep the friendship than to get into an argument and unnecessarily get into something else. So I think it's a long-winded answer, but the point I'm trying to make is that if it's being presented as a strong opinion, that's where I guess it gets into a problem. But if it's being presented as a personal experience, I guess there's a lot of room available to wriggle around.
Awesome. Do you think a small talk is a conversation?
Depends, I guess. I mean, when you said small talk, the first thought that came to my mind was a train journey or a flight journey, wherein it always starts with a small talk, right? I mean, you start with the weather or the food being served or whatever. But I've seen many of those conversations also build into something beautiful. So maybe as long as it's a good kind of a startup or a warm up, it's not bad.
I've always believed that the most important conversation we have is the conversation we have with ourselves to begin with, right? It could be anything. It could be when you want to get into a relationship. It could be a personal trauma. It could be, it could be starting a new career. Any of those things. And by that, I mean acceptance of a situation, right? I want to pick up a job. I must be sure about the fact. And I completely agree that, sometimes you have to embrace what's coming your way and then maybe learn.
Yeah.
But acceptance is very important, especially the fact that, especially when you and I have discussed outside of the studio, vulnerability, acceptance of one's situation as is. Agree? Thoughts?
I mean, conversations with self. In fact, if I can expand it slightly, I tell my daughters indirectly, I'm telling myself as well, that the relationship that needs to be strongest for any of us is with ourselves. Because the one person we're going to live with for the rest of our lives is ourselves.
Yes.
So the conversations with the self are absolutely, absolutely important. acceptance is one way of having a conversation with ourselves. If I had to think of a few other situations wherein conversations with self are important, for example, uh, one is I'm not sure about what I'm feeling, or when I'm not sure about it could be not being sure about something, or not even knowing uh, what we are going through. So conversations with self can help in every situation. Acceptance, I'm saying, this is one situation. Definitely it'll help, because unless we accept where we are, there's no progress. But I'm saying conversations with the self can help in every situation. For example, I'm just thinking loud here. Let me take this example of say worry, okay, or irrational fears. Okay, now irrational fear is a very rational way to put it, but most fears are by nature irrational unless there's something imminent which is going to happen,
So
which is
true.
visible,
Yeah.
right? So how would the conversation with self happen in such cases? uh, it is about asking oneself as to what exactly is happening. If, for example, let me take an example. For the longest time, I don't know if I can say it in past tense or I have to say present continuous or whatever. Financial fear has been one thing which has been very, very deep rooted. I don't know where it comes
Sure.
from. Could well be from childhood, for example.
Mhm.
Because I remember father used to say, if you don't study well, you'll beg on the streets. Okay. So I don't know where it comes from. I mean, I was brought up in a middle class, lower middle class family. But if I had to talk about conversations with self when it comes to this fear, any rational person or any friend of mine would say, but you're doing so well in your career, you're so well educated, you are in such a good position, you're earning so well, and you have such a good bank balance, so on and so forth. So that it's not rational. Uh, so somewhere the other thing which has worked for me in conversations with self is that if I'm just sitting with myself, it goes into the infinite loop of, oh my god, what if, oh my god, what if it and that goes into, and this other friend of mine who was speaking to, slight digression, but it's an important point on conversation with self versus how these things can pan out. So he has this, so he's a doctor. uh, there was an unfortunate death that happened under his watch, though it was not his fault. And his
A
view,
patient of his.
a patient of his, lost his life. But even legally, it was not his fault, and he was aware of it. It was something else that went wrong, which is typically within the domain of all the things that can go wrong in a medical situation. But then the thought process, this is the way he explained to me. He trusts me, so he shared his story with me. Very interesting. He says, what if there's a case put on me? What if I lose my job? What if my child, who's just 2 years old, doesn't have a father? And what if for the rest of his life there's no father? And what if with medical advancements he lives up to 185 years by the time he grows up, and he's dirt poor and having a distraught life?
And these are self
These are
conversations.
all self conversations.
True.
So the point I'm trying to make is that left to oneself, sometimes these self conversations may actually pan out like this. And the only rational way I can put it, and again, this is not the only way the conversations can happen, but some of these negative conversations, the way it goes is that you look at step one. If there are 5 things that can happen, the mind picks the worst possible scenario. Then from there, even from there, if you go to step 2, there are 5 further possibilities. Again, the mind picks the worst possible scenario, and then so on. So in 3 steps, you are like either downtrodden, on the streets, or dying of some unheard of disease. So the fear left to itself can create something like this. So one thing I think may work, I've seen work in from my situation, for example, is when you talk to someone else, when they say something, it builds a thought in my mind, and then I add to that, and then they say something else based on what I'm saying, and that adds some other thought to my mind. So it actually starts becoming a positive loop in a way, me saying something, the other person saying something else, and so on. The last point I'll make on this one is that in that process, instead of the mind going, what if, what if, what if, what if, it's like a iterative loop. When I'm getting a positive cue in a conversation with, say, someone who's able to understand and so on, the conversation can be more fruitful, is what I found in some situations.
I'd like to go back on that point where you mentioned that the mind picks up the worst possible scenario.
Yeah.
I think here, this is what I would like to share my personal experience, me as a person, which is I believe in a lot of self affirmations, and I affirmations which is about how I feel as a person. I wake up in the morning, and the first thing I say is, "Thank you for a wonderful day." And by that, in no way it means that I would not face challenges during the course of the day. But that also means that come what may, by the time the day ends, I've passed through all of that successfully. So my personal experience, when I look at a situation, I generally do not tend to pick up the worst possible scenario. But again, what could be the worst possible scenario could also be the best possible scenario for the other person.
Yeah.
But I feel that I'd like to just add on to what you said about the self-conversation part. And as I said, to me, in many ways, self-conversation is also, a way of accepting the current situation. I mean, I know that in your own personal experiences you've shared with me, and if that's okay, I would love to, really talk about it. You went through a phase of a relationship where things did not work out the way it did not. And I know that when you go through this phase, there's a certain amount of vulnerability which you go through, right? That can either make you a stronger person, or it could probably make or break, right? Can you talk through the process of how you evolved through where you are today? And by that, I don't mean just you are in a strong, wonderful relationship, and I really want this to be the best one for you. But I think above and beyond just having another relationship, there is also Rajesh, the person, because unless he's strong from within, unless he believes that I can give my life or my relationship or my ability to love another chance, that would have never happened, right? You always believed in the fact that, yes. So talk me through that phase of yours when you were going through this phase. What did you do which helped you where you are? And I can understand you've had an exceptional career. For my listeners, Rajesh doesn't like to talk too much about his career, although he has a great career. His last gig was that of, if I would call it a gig, but as a partner, he worked as a partner with E&Y and Deloitte. E&Y, to many non-consulting people, it means Ernst & Young global consulting firm.
They call themselves just EY now.
Yeah.
They've dropped the Ernst & Young.
And two, as we move ahead, the E&Y might merge too. But yeah, talk me through this whole process of what went through your mind.
I think when it comes to my relationship journey, so I would maybe look at it in 3 or 4 phases. Okay. Between the two relationships. Okay. So I was divorced and I got remarried, and there was almost a 6-7 years gap between these two. So there were 3 or 4 phases in this gap. Okay. So first one was dealing with the separation. Okay. How I looked at my separation. That was a part 1. Part 2 was then dealing with myself. Who am I? What am I? Kind of a phase I was in. I'll talk about each of them. And the third phase was about, okay, now I guess I need a relationship kind of a phase. And the last was, okay, now this is the person I'm now taking the plunge again. So briefly talking about each of these phases, I guess the first phase about dealing with the divorce or the separation was the conversation I had with myself about what do I say to myself about that relationship. The initial thing was obviously a lot of negative talk about self and the other person in the relationship. But fortunately, where I found the balance or the peace, and now that's I feel that's the right way to look at it, is to say it's not about whether I was right or my wife was right or whether I was wrong or she was wrong. I think the way to look at it is that sometimes these things are just unfortunate. Okay, so it's not about who's right, who's wrong. These things are just unfortunate series of events that just go in a particular way. And when I got to that point where they just said it's just a series of events and it's unfortunate, that's when I felt okay, it's a good closure. It was a positive closure. There was no negativity there. I was not writing off that relationship. I was not writing off that phase of my relationship. There was a beautiful child we had together. So that helped me sort of can that part in a good, constructive way. That it's unfortunate. We both are normal people with our own great qualities and our own innate flaws. But it just so happened that that relationship brought out some of the darker elements of each of us. Okay, that was part A.
If I may,
Yeah, sure.
What do you mean by dark elements?
I guess dark elements as in two people when they're together, sometimes they tend to bring out the best in each other. Sometimes one may bring out the best in the other, and the other may actually bring out the worst in the first person, and there are all those combinations thereof. But I guess in our situation, as I said, everybody has some weaker aspects and some stronger aspects. Maybe in our situation, it so happened that we somehow, because of a combination of events, we somehow ended up bringing out the worst in each other. And I think it's not about bringing out the worst in each other. I've not actually spoken about this much in this fashion, but I guess it's also about a situation when sometimes things happen in a particular way wherein it brings out the worst in you. It's not just the other person bringing out the worst in you. The situation, a lot of factors end up bringing out the worst in each of us, and it tends to sort of take the relationship to a stage where it's a point of no return.
Can you say that this has, to a large extent, in a way, expectations being mismatched, or two individuals maybe growing, but growing independently, outgrowing each other?
I guess the one of the biggest things when I look back is that lack of communication actually, on top of all the things I already said, when things are not going as planned and events are not going as planned, when we're not communicating well, that's when we're not helping the situation, right? So, and I've seen now in my relationship, in my marriage now, the role of communication. I never understood the role of communication earlier, but now when I see in the worst of situations, when we're able to talk honestly and help each other understand where we are coming from, that can actually solve a lot of issues. So to my mind, of course, I'm not picking one versus the other, but lack of communication, a combination of factors, unfortunate, all of this. But I think communication played an important role. You could also say, as you said, compatibility, which could either be non-existent to either begin with, or there was compatibility initially, but as you said, couples grow apart because as you're moving on with life, each person might grow in a different direction, which collectively may not make sense as a couple. So part of that also could be. But all in all, I think the way I managed to make sense of it was all of this put together. I can just say it's unfortunate. A bunch of things happened. It was unfortunate, but it helped me move forward. because I had to move forward. And the way to move forward was not in a negative way, because I didn't want to carry any bitterness or any ill will for or any sort of bitterness towards myself as well. So both were important. I should neither carry bitterness for my ex-wife nor carry guilt in my own heart. So that's the second part of the journey. But the first part was to can it. So that was part A. So you want to add something?
No, completely. I think this is something which I firmly believe, and I'm sure you'll agree, is that um, we see bitterness around us when we are bitter from within. We see joyfulness around us when we are joyful from within, right? I definitely want to go back to that last point which you said, where you said that um, you had to move forward, right? And under these circumstances, sometimes people just stop moving forward. They get stuck somewhere, and that has nothing to do with their financial situation or what they are doing in their job or anything. So talk me through the process of when you realized I need to move forward. One, B, did you get help for that? Did you seek help in moving forward? Was it your daughter which was also responsible for you to believe I am responsible for the kid? I need to move forward. I'm responsible for myself first. I need to move forward.
I guess of all the major events that happened in my life, I normally joke that all the major decisions were taken by me. Life didn't throw any curveball at me. Life kept happening, but all the biggest decisions I took by my own volition. And in most other situations, it appeared like the road was naturally curving one way or the other. It didn't seem like a crossroad where I had to stop and decide whether I should go left or right. But in this situation, this was the only situation where I actually felt like I was at a crossroad and decide whether I have to move forward with the relationship or move ahead and look at something else. So, and it was a very tough decision, obviously. I mean, I had a kid and I love my kid to bits. And there were a lot of others, it's like, I can't generalize it, but at least I was brought up in this very traditional mindset, marriage is for life. So in our extended family, there were hardly any cases of divorce. So even breaking that mental barrier was a big deal, not just about my kid, being there in the relationship. So a lot of these things. So I had to really have a very tough, long look at where life was and have a very, very, it was a tough decision to make my mind one way or the other. But what I guess eventually helped me was I just try to look at things completely unconstrained in all situations, be it work, be it life. So I just cut all the artificial constraints about societal norms or anything else. I just said, okay, what is it that is best for me, for life, for the kid? Is it good for my kid if we are together for the sake of being together, but not being happy at all? So is that better for the kid versus we actually separating? And though it might be humongous short-term pain, but in the long term, it's all, at least the kid is living in one happy setup. Okay. So a lot of these conversations, a lot of these decisions, but end of the day, what helped me was thinking in an unconstrained manner, what is good for me, what is good for my kid, what is good for my ex, where life should take me. And I think the one question that I asked myself was, can I actually make this relationship work? Do I have it in me to make this relationship work? And if the answer is no, then the relationship should end. One interesting thing which I discovered in that process, because the first thought that came to my mind was, okay, if not this, then who? If not this relationship, then who? So fortunately, I told myself that these are two independent, non-related questions. Okay, the first question is there any future to this relationship? Answer yes, no. What happens next is a completely different question. The two should not be mixed. At least that's what I told myself. So if the first question is, does this relationship have a future? If the answer is no, then that's it. The relationship ends. What happens next? That life will tell you. In some of my friends, when they had this similar situation, the next what happens next question was somehow intertwined with this question about should I end the relationship. So I said we should look at this as two separate questions altogether. So I think all of this helped. It was tough, but I took a very decisive call, and I can say it played out well for all of us.
I'd like to jump in here when you mentioned, if not this, what next?
Yeah.
And I think most of us, many of us, and I think this is where it might sound a little philosophical of late. Many spiritual gurus talk about it. But don't you feel that the most important relationship is the one which you have with yourself? And do you really need an external validation in the form of having another relationship for you to make that decision to walk away? Because at the end of the day, the way I look at relationships is, for me, the most beautiful relationship I have personally is with me and my creator. And I use creator in a different sense, and you probably would. But I think we have this beautiful life, and we have to make the most of it in terms of evolving, growing, and becoming, the person we want to be. We can't sit here and predict how we will be 25 years from now, but we do have a fair idea in terms of how we want to take our life forward. And I'm not talking about becoming, in my case, the voice of the next generation or anything of that sort, but just who we are as a person, how we evolve and better ourselves every single day, right? Did you struggle with the fact that, or did you feel that I absolutely need someone, only then will I be able to, prove to myself or to the people around me that, hey, it's not my fault. Things didn't work out. So sometimes I feel when we say we need another relationship, sometimes we want to prove to ourselves or people around us, I'm not a bad relationship guy. See how the next relationship is working wonderfully. I hope you're getting where I'm trying to come to. How important was for you, or how important do you feel today? I mean, I know you're in a safe, secure relationship, but do you believe that working on yourself, being secure yourself in your emotional space, helped you have a relationship or not have a relationship? That's a separate thing. But I mean, I feel that when you said, and that yes, there are two separate things, one relationship with the other, but do we really need that validation to have another relationship to prove to yourself that I'm good at this or I'm not good at that? So
I think there are
talk about that phase between one where you actually evolved and probably helped you get into a relationship, which
I think the thought process is not that. I don't know if need for validation is the only reason to be in a relationship. If that's the need, it's a very negative space, to be honest. And I don't know if anyone gets into this another relationship wanting to prove to the world that I'm not a bad relationship person. All these positions, to my mind, can lead to a very unfruitful next relationship.
Absolutely.
I guess which is why I said we should separate these two questions, because what happens next will happen next.
True.
Maybe the future is no relationship. Maybe the future is lots of living relationships. Maybe the future is, another marriage. Maybe the future is 3 more marriages. I don't know. Okay. Maybe the future is in the Himalayas. I don't know. My point was, do not mix the question of should this relationship stay or end with what happens next. What happens next will happen. Let that happen in its due course of time. The question is, does this relationship have a future? If the answer is no, then end it. And it could be for a job, for example. Is this job working for me? What happens next? Yes, of course. Maybe that's not as such a, it may be, maybe not. But if if someone comes to a conclusion that this job is not right for me, then this job needs to end. What happens next? That'll happen.
Absolutely, and I think that's precisely what I was trying to figure out. Because if you look at it, especially from today's point of view, and I wouldn't blame a particular generation of people, but in general, over the time, if you look at it, somehow, somewhere, it seems like that. I'm not saying everyone. I'm not saying about you or me, but in general, quickly getting into another relationship is kind of a validation for you to prove yourself.
That's a rebound.
Yes,
It's a rebound.
I mean, you call it rebound. I'm just saying it's a way of to saying, oh, I'm good at it. So getting back to my earlier question, did you and this is very important, did you seek professional help to tide through the phase? Did you speak? Did you have a community or a group or a support system around you, people who you could speak to?
So I did meet a couple of counselors, but at that time, maybe I was not coachable enough. I was too headstrong in my mind. I was like, what would these guys tell me about? What would they know? And
I love this, coachable enough.
I
Yeah.
was not coachable, and maybe I had a bit of hubris as well. That I know I've read so many books. I know human psychology. What will these guys tell me? So at that time, I didn't go to a counselor. To be honest, I went to a counselor much later. Okay? So which is the phase 2 of my journey, which is who am I first journey. Because the way you pointed out, my first reaction was I will end this and get into one more relationship. Okay, because it felt like I'm out in the desert. Okay, so I had to first deal with that. Okay, and the answer to that was not jumping into another relationship. Not that I was so thoughtful and I planned it so well. I was on all matrimonial sites and all dating sites from the word get go, from the day my separation process started. I was lucky that I didn't get into any of those relationships. Okay, and it gave me a chance to reflect. That period gave me a chance to reflect on who I am, what I want, where do I want to be, how do I see life. If in that phase I had gotten into a relationship, maybe my journey would have been very different. Okay, so the second phase of my journey was to ask myself, who am I, where what is life, and so on and so forth. So there, the process about self-acceptance, or the way I said it, it's not that the other person is wrong. It's not even that you are wrong. Okay, both conversations were important for me.
Walk us through those conversations, Rajesh, if you can.
Yeah. See, I think it's not the other person's fault for that. I had to then look at that person and their choices and all their behaviors in a very, very objective manner. Okay. And there are two important parts to that. Firstly, understanding why someone behaves or does what they do versus accepting that. Okay, let me put it differently. If I am talking to a serial killer, okay, and if I look at that person's entire life journey, I may actually see why that person ended up being a serial killer. Okay, could be a combination of events, childhood, whatever, I see those things. I can understand why this person landed up where that person landed up. But that doesn't mean that I accept that person to be my friend or to be my my partner, if that happens to be the relationship I wish. But so understanding someone's behavior versus acceptance, these are two separate things, is an important thing I discovered in that process.
Can you just...
So just because I understand all that, let's for example take the case of say a wife beater. I'm just giving an example. Okay, now that person could have a temper problem. Okay, and that temper problem could actually be from a clinical perspective not justified, but they could be a reason why this person turned out the way this person turned out. Okay, so when you look at it objectively, you understand why this person turned out the way this person turned out. Okay, or why this person behaves the way this person behaves, or why this person makes the choices they make. Okay, that doesn't mean I want to live with that person. Okay, so the understanding is important. That understanding helps you not monsterize that person. Okay, this is a person. It's very easy for us to sit in judgment and say, oh, this person is bad, this person is good. But if you actually understand why they are where they are, it helped me, I don't know if that's universally true, to look at that person as a human being. Like all of us have our own shades of personality traits. Everybody has personality traits, right? So it helped me objectively look at that person, saying, okay, this is why this person is worried. It helped me reduce the bitterness. Okay, that doesn't mean that I want to live my life with that person. Okay, I understand, but it doesn't mean that I accept to be part of your life for the rest of my life, or I accept to be with you for the rest of my life.
This is so wholesome, Rajesh.
Yeah.
I think it's. I wish I could just jump over and give you a warm hug for this, because it's this is very important question, and I think this is a part of what we are trying to discuss today. Why do you think people choose to stay on? Because at the end of the day, it's the choice. They choose to stay on despite domestic abuse, or let's say in a workplace situation, going through workplace harassment. Do you feel that it has a lot to do with the fact that a person believes that I'm only good enough for this, or my choices are limited, or it does not matter wherever I'm. I've heard people say in work environments, they just casually say, कहीं और जाएगा भी तो यही मिलेंगे. अब choice तुम्हारी है, काम करना है कि कुछ और करना है. Right? I mean, this whole perspective comes in, and I'm trying to just get into it, because it does not matter whether it's a relationship or you're in a work environment or anywhere else. I think somewhere down the line, have we all started believing that we are not enough for this? Or
I'm no psychologist, but I can talk from my experience.
yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. This is not about
yeah.
being.
What I've seen, what I've felt especially, is that change is not an easy process. Okay, as you were speaking, the best example I could think of is that you take a frog and put it in boiling water, it'll jump out of it. But if you put a frog in normal water and start heating up the water, it'll die without realizing. Okay. So change is not an easy process. So I think it's as simple as resistance to change. It's not about...
Do you believe that?
To my mind, I guess that's the biggest hurdle. Most people resist change. Okay. The status quo, no matter how bad it is, unless it is so bad that it's like boiling water where you want to jump out, I guess most people resist change. To my mind, I think that's number one impediment before everything else, because to change, I mean, and there was this funny incident in this B school friend of mine. We were sitting and chatting, and he was a gold medalist in our batch. So just to establish the credentials before I make my point. So as we were chatting, there was a glass on top of which there was a water bottle put. As I was just talking to him, I just was, I was not very mindful. I just put the bottle on top of a overturned glass. He had to drink water. As he was talking to me, he picked up that bottle, drank the water, and put the bottle exactly on top of the glass. Okay, not being mindful. So the putting the bottle down on the table was far easier mentally than not mentally, far easier physically than actually adjusting the bottle on the inverted glass. But to do that, he had to think differently. Okay. He had to think different from the status quo. That, to my mind, is a far bigger exercise. So look at it. Physically, what's easier, to put the bottle back on the table or put it back on the inverted glass? It's far easier physically to put the bottle back on the table. But it's far difficult mentally to change the status quo. What was the status quo? Where's the bottle? Just put it back where it was. It's far easier mentally. Okay. So to my mind, I guess changing status quo is the biggest hurdle. The willingness to change status quo is the biggest hurdle.
But is that all, Rajesh?
It's not all. It's not all. Sorry, I'm just butting in. So I guess number one is that, to my mind. The number two is, I'll give a slightly two data points which come to my mind. There was this placement consultant who once said this to me. I was asking her about how much money should I ask for in my next job. So she said, think of an obnoxious number, add 20% to that, and then ask that number. So I said, why do you say that? She said, yeah, I mean, because if you put that value on yourself, that's when others will put that value on you.
Absolutely.
Okay?
And that is brilliant.
And a lot of us, and the, I think again, linking it back to the resistance to change. If let's say you're getting 100, earning 100 right now, if someone asks you, how much do you want? You will say 130. You'll say 125. You'll say 150. You'll never say 500 because you're mentally pegged to 100. Okay, that's the resistance to change I'm talking about.
True.
So the resistance to change, to my mind, is the biggest factor. There are many other factors, and the resistance to change also comes from, okay, this is a job I've been doing for the last 5 years. So maybe I can only do this much. But have you actually taken a pause and asked yourself? All this requires a different level of thinking. A boss of mine put it beautifully once. He said, if I knock on your door at 12 in the night, and we both were bachelors back then, he said, and we used to live together close by in a colony. He said, if I knock on your door at 12:30 in the night and say, let's go for a drive, you will say yes. But if I knock on your door at 12:30 and say, let's sit on a presentation, you will say no. So his point was, the mental laziness is way higher than physical laziness. The same point I'm trying to make in different ways. The mind, once it gets set in one area, it just wants the Newton's law, right? Any object at rest or in motion continues to stay at rest or in motion unless an external force acts on it. That external force is the impediment.
Physics.
This is my view.
Physics, the universal
I'm
truth.
not a psychologist, caveat once again, but
No,
this is my view.
I don't think I was asking from a psychologist's perspective, because a psychologist's perspective is independent of individuals. So this is more from a personal experience, and that's what our conversation is about. During this entire process, how often did you judge yourself? Because I think judgment comes through. How often did you?
You mean the relationship journey?
Yeah, the journey, your personal journey, going through this, evolving, becoming. How often do we? I think we tend to judge ourselves all the time, in some form or the other. It may be sometimes very subtle and sometimes not. But I'm sure apart from the vulnerability factor, there's also the judgment factor, right? And maybe how we judge ourselves also makes us a little more or less vulnerable. Does that work? Does that sound about correct?
I'm thinking about it. So maybe it's a good cue to start talking about the phase 2 of that journey. So phase 2 of the journey was where I was in self-doubt, because when a relationship ended for me, my question was, am I lovable? Am I lovable enough?
Okay.
Would people want to be would someone want to be with me? Was my question. So again, luck or life played its role. I entered into a relationship, and that relationship did a lot of good to me, because it made me believe in myself again. So I'm giving a different answer. I'll link it back to what I'm trying to say, but let me lay it out first to you. So that relationship was beautiful, though it didn't translate into marriage, but it genuinely helped me at that stage in my life. It helped me believe in myself. It helped me understand what love is. It helped me understand what relationships could be. So the point I'm trying to make is that the biggest learning in that phase was allow life to happen to you. Okay, so I kept sitting and thinking, okay, am I this? Am I that? Am I that? But life happened to me. Okay, And when life happened to me, all these questions got addressed automatically. It's like, it's like if I have to look at my next 10 years journey, if I had to sit and plan my next 10 years journey, what all skills will I require, what all mindset will I require, I can sit here forever, but life will happen by itself. So the biggest learning in that phase was allow life to happen to you, which is being vulnerable, not trying to control things and am I this, am I that,
Which is also being vulnerable.
which is exactly being vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay. So being vulnerable is to allow things to happen, not trying to control, part A. Part B was, uh, you know, uh, so I told myself this. So in my extended family, I was a star kid. In my family, my mother's side, my father's side, I was a star kid. In my school friends, I was a star kid. People would say, "Oh, look at Rajesh," and so on. So I was a star kid in my family. So there was this uh, unspoken thing कि ये तो राम जैसा बच्चा है. He's like this ideal boy. So well behaved, so good at studies. The guy. But there was another part of me which was not at all that ideal boy kind of a image which was thrust upon me, but I thrust upon myself. So that's in that phase too. I had to actually, and I dramatized it to myself. I said, there is this ideal Rajesh that has been brought up and you've been putting yourself under the pressure of that. And then there's a real guy. What are the real guys? I said, only one can survive.
True.
And I have to choose which one to kill. Okay. Not which one to let live. Only when I kill one would the other live. So I said, okay, this image of what I'm supposed to be, let me kill that. Only then who I could be would emerge. Okay.
How long did you have to live with that image, which you finally killed?
30 plus years, right up till my divorce. And anything which I would do against that template, my mental template of this good boy image, I used to feel extremely ashamed, guilty, why am I like this? I'm supposed to be like this. So there was this constant chatter, and all that led to lack of confidence, poor body language, because this is not, it's like, I'm running around with a whip. Okay. An invisible whip. And I'm whipping myself day in and day out because I'm not being that ideal person I'm supposed to be. So the only way to let go of the whip was to let go of the pressure to be that guy which I was not.
Yes.
Okay. So along with that, the whip also goes away. Then I'm just being who I am, right? And comfortable being who I am. And that was the phase where, a new relationship happened, a lot of things happened, life happened. So I learned a lesson to allow life to happen to you.
With that relationship?
With life, with that relationship and in life in general. This friend of mine said something beautiful when I was trying to worry about something. She said, do you think you're God? I said, why? Why do you think you're responsible for everything, every emotion everybody else feels? I mean, let them take responsibility for their emotions. You focus on what you can do.
This was basically that alter ego of yours which you had built around you, the ideal person who has to be responsible for everyone's emotions.
Exactly.
Okay. Except your own emotions.
Except my own emotions. So it was like, she said, are you trying to play God? Let others be and let you focus on, let you be. So a lot of these important lessons, I would say I let those lessons come to me. Okay. I didn't have to chase, I didn't have to think, okay, who I should be, what I should be, how I should be. I just had to have the courage or the vulnerability to allow life to happen to me.
Do you think that this relationship, I'm assuming, if I'm correct, is in between between the first, your separation and your present?
Yes.
In between what happened, right?
Yes.
Do you feel a lot of self-exploration, a lot of self-evaluation coming out of the shell of becoming who you are? Did that relationship play an important role?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. But I would say a lot of things happened simultaneously. That relationship definitely was one of the catalysts. I had made some new friends who are my besties today. In that phase, I had learned some of these new lessons, which are now my credos. I had devoured YouTube for zillions of hours of content on spirituality, philosophy, history, cosmology, all the things I was talking about, evolution. So my curiosity went up hundredfold because I had time on my hand. I was not running a family. I was living by myself largely. So I had access to all the technology. I was traveling mostly in my consulting job. So again, I had more time than any average bachelor because I had to travel a lot. So when you're traveling, again, you're by yourself. You're in your flight, you are by yourself. In the hotel rooms, you are by yourself. So I had a lot of time. And thank God I used that time to nurture my curiosity and try to get into this. Now, as I said, I can link it back and say, okay, all this is meaning this. But then at that time, I was just running after whatever interested me. So in that phase, also a lot of important lessons came by my way.
What are those?
So first one is allowing life to happen to you. I think
Yeah.
that was a humongous lesson for me. Because if I had written my own script back then, even in the 100th draft, it wouldn't be the life I'm living right now. Okay. I won't say it's better or worse. It's very different. So there's no point trying to write those scripts. There's a point. Let life decide the script.
It probably could have been even better than what you are today.
Could have
Possible.
been. Yeah, whatever. So just allow life to happen to you. Don't try to, because trying to write the script ahead of time is a wastage of time.
But do you also believe, to a certain extent, that wherever you are today, I'm trying to just get a little bit, and that is also tied to my next question, or rather my next point of conversation. I think that's what we are having. Do you believe that many of the things in our life are predestined? Most of the scripts are written, and somewhere in between, we have to, customize a few things. But largely, it is written down for us. Honestly, I mean, I just want a very honest answer, because my experiences have showed me that. Okay, let me put it this way. Have you had premonitions at different phases in your life, different stages in your life? Let's get to that first before we.
I wouldn't say premonitions, but I would say this thing that Paulo Coelho said in Alchemist, and our own Shah Rukh Khan also said in one of.
You are a Shah Rukh Khan fan?
Not at all.
Yeah.
So, but not that I don't like him, not just that I'm not like fan.
Yeah.
But the thing about, if you really want something, the whole world conspiring to make it happen to you, I experienced that a few times in my life.
I'm generally in these conversations, I speak the least, but I think we are talking about something which is very close to my heart, and more than that, I enjoy conversing with you. I feel that to a large extent, the universe resides within us in many ways, and our imagination. I mean, I think for anything to happen, we need to have that imagination. We need to have that vision, whatever you want to call it as, that this is what wants to happen. And if, going back to what I said, if you're bitter, if you're happy, if you're joyful, it's all a state of mind from within. If you believe that there's something you want in your life, and if you put your heart, mind, and soul to it, whatever you call it, cosmos, universe, God, they bring it to you. In many ways, it happens to you. That does not in any way mean that the universe will bring it to me and I just sit out there. No, the universe also helps you when you work towards it. Coming back to your point about universe conspiring, and I would want to tie it to the fact that do you believe that Rajesh's script has been already written, and he's trying to, he's following that path knowingly or unknowingly? Do you believe in this?
I don't know, honestly. I'll tell you, it might sound a little funny or maybe even hypocritical. At an intellectual level, feel that life is random. Okay, at an intellectual level, if I look at evolution, I feel things just happen. I mean, we try to find meaning in it, but things happen. That's at an intellectual level. I'll talk about the hypocrisy now, but I also want to know what my stars have in store for me. I also want to talk to an astrologer to see what he says about me, what he says about my new venture. I want to do that as well. So,
Do you wake up in the morning and look at the newspaper or on the internet to check how your day is going to go?
no, not that. I'm not that at it. But I think so that's why I said I think the best way to say it is I don't know instead of trying to say something and sound very hypocritical. So I guess at an intellectual level, I feel life is random. But I'm also humble enough to accept that we don't know what we don't know. Okay, there is a method to the way the universe works. Just because we've understood a few things doesn't mean we've understood everything. There are a lot of things which we don't know, and I think we should just leave it at that we don't know. Just because you don't see unicorns doesn't mean there are no unicorns. But just because you've not seen it yet, it doesn't mean there are unicorns. Right? So to me, I'm happy leaving it at I don't know, because that's the, either position you take, that there are unicorns or there are no unicorns, both the positions could be challenged. To me, the easiest thing is to say, and to keep myself at peace, I don't know. Okay.
Oh, I recently heard, Rajesh, that we have about 1,000 unicorns in the country right now.
Decacons and, whatever, centicons, I don't know what are there, a lot of new terms there. But, the other thing I would say is...
But you've still not answered my question. Do you believe that there is a script?
Do I want to believe the astrologers when they're saying good things about me? Yes. Do I want to believe them when they're saying bad things about me? Absolutely. I said no. How can this be true? So as I said, that's where the hypocrisy comes in. I choose these things conveniently when they're working for me. But I think at a heart level, to me, what's more important is the other thing I've learned in that phase is you cannot control the events that happen in your life, right? So all that you can control is the way you react to the events. Events don't define who you are. The way you deal with those events defines who you are. Okay, so a couple of more points I'll add to this. Secondly, the human mind again adapts so beautifully to changing situations that even if you're out of luck tomorrow, end up in a far better situation than what you think you are right now, you'll adapt to that. And conversely, if you end up in a far negative situation than what you think you are right now, you will still adapt. So, and the last point I'll add to this is that, and I've seen people, and this is my theory, that people are born with X percentage of happiness and X percentage of Y percentage of sadness when they are born. This is again a strong point of view I'm propagating. So the people who are born with...
These are your opinions.
My opinions. Yeah. This is my opinion. This is no theory. There's nothing backing this theory.
To all the viewers out there, disclaimer, this is purely Rajesh's
opinion. Yes.
Okay, for all you know, all of you probably are born with only happiness. I'm just putting it out there.
Probably.
Yes.
But then I'm actually saying it in a slightly sarcastic and funny manner. The people who are born with, say, 30% sadness and 70% happiness, no matter what shitty situation you put them into, they'll find a 70% happiness.
Sure.
Okay. And there are people who are born with that 70% sadness. No matter what situation you will put them in, they'll find the 70% things to crib about.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I know I'm saying in a lighter vein, not that you can't change, but the large point I'm making is that it doesn't matter whether things are preordained or things are random. What is more important is the way we deal with those situations, which is what eventually makes us happy or sad. Like there would be millions in the world who would kill to have a life like we are having. But still, neither of us can claim that we are top of the world, right? We still have a lot of things to look forward to and a lot of things to, crib about. So, so I guess it's more about the way we take it. That's the way I'm, a long answer to your question, whether life is preordained or random. To me, my long answer to your question was it doesn't matter.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Between Us podcast. This podcast was recorded at manicpod Studios in Chembur, Mumbai. Our sound engineer is Mainak Chakraborty, and your producers are Arnav Dogra and Santosh Kumar. The Between Us podcast uploads episodes weekly, and we'll see you next time.